Boom! Yes, folks, we're going again. So we're continuing in our series where we're discussing the multiplication and the division of fractions. In the first two videos prior to this one, we discussed multiplication of two fractions, one fraction multiplied by another fraction, and we also discussed division, where we had one fraction being divided by another fraction. In this video and any one to follow immediately after, we will discuss the issue of multiplication and division of a fraction by a constant, by an integer. So let us start with the multiplication. If we have to multiply a fraction by a constant k, so let us say you have the fraction n over d, numerator divided by denominator, multiplied by a constant k. Or you can express it as a constant k multiplied by a fraction, numerator divided by denominator. But if you remember, if you recall, that any constant k can be written as a fraction k over 1, then it devolves to this. You now have n over d multiplied by k over 1, or if you had the k written first, you would have k over 1 multiplied by n over d. And we already discussed what happens when you multiply into fractions by each other. So you have n by k over d, nk over d, or if the k was written first, you'll have kn over d. Same difference. Right? N by k over d, k by n over d. What both of these forms have in common is that you multiply the numerator alone by k. So in other words, if you're multiplying a fraction by a constant k, then to do that, all you have to do is multiply the numerator alone by the constant. Alright? So, let me do some examples. You know we like to explain and then we like to illustrate. Alright? So suppose you have, where are we going, boy? Let me take some space on the board. Suppose you have 3 over 7 multiplied by 2. If you multiply any fraction 3 over 7 by 2, all you need to do is multiply 2 by 3 and you get 6 over 7. Alright? Let me say you have 21 over 17, and you want to multiply that by 4. If you're multiplying 21 over 17 by 4, then all you do is multiply the numerator by 4. So 21 over 17 by 4 would simply be 84 over 17. That 4 looking like a 9, boy. 84 over 17. And that is all. That is all. Right? Because d by 1 here will just give you d. So the denominator doesn't change. 1 by d will give you the same d. So again, to repeat, if you're multiplying a fraction by a constant, by an integer, by a whole number, or even by a decimal, all you have to do is multiply that entity by the numerator alone. Because remember, this k could be a decimal too. K could be 3.5. K could be 2.89. So if you have to multiply a fraction by a constant, even if the constant is not a whole number, you multiply the constant by the numerator and the numerator alone. So, if for example, instead of multiplying 3 over 7 by 2, we have to multiply 3 over 7 by 1.5. Well, that would be it will now be 3 by 1.5 over 7, which will be 4.5 over 7. Right? And if we had to multiply 21 over 17 by, let us say, 2.5, if we had to multiply that by, sorry, if we had to multiply 21 over 17 by 21 over 17 multiplied by 2.5, that would be 21 by 2.5 over 17. 21 by 2 is 42. Half of 21 is 10.5. So 42 plus 10.5 is 52.5. Right? So that will be 52.5, 52.5 over 17. Let me just verify on my calculator here. 2.5 multiplied by 21 is equal to, boom, 52.5. Beautiful. Alright? So the principle holds, this principle in black here holds whether k is a whole number or a decimal or whatever it is. K could be an irrational number too, as we discussed in a previous video. K could be a mixed number, etc., etc. Of course, if k is a mixed number, it will eventually boil down to a fraction multiplied by a fraction, but you will leave that alone. Right? So generally, in situations like this, especially at the lower levels of maths, k would be another integer. So we define the general principle using the integers as the preliminary example. Just bear in mind, however, that k could also be a decimal. Alright? Nice. So again, just to round off the video, you're multiplying a regular fraction numerator over denominator by k, which you could write as k over 1. You get n over k. So let me just write it over nk, sorry, you get nk over d. Let me just write it over in more generic terms, leaving out the d over 1, just to drive home the point. So you multiply a fraction, n over d, multiply by k. You just simply get kn over d. Alright? I personally prefer to write the k in front of the n, but if you prefer to write the n in front of the k, does make a difference. So now we're going to go on in the next video to what happens when you divide in a fraction by the constant k.